Morning, so if I can ask you to come on in and find your seats, and if you can even begin, I know these big screens are enticing to stay out on the edges, but come on into the center. You can see the people up close and in person, and you can still see the big screens. Don't everybody move at once, it'll get really chaotic. Well, I'd like to welcome you all to our final session of APPA 2012. My name is Robin Pierce, and I'm the Director of Facilities and Planning at Portland State University and the newly installed APPA Vice President for Professional Development. I hope you enjoyed this morning's breakout sessions, and I trust everyone had a great time at the reception and banquet last night. Congratulations to all our award winners. There was a long list of those, and maybe we can give one more round of applause because I think some of them are sitting here in the room. Before we get underway, I want to recognize and thank Jacobs, the sponsor for today's closing session. Jacobs also serves as a sponsor of the APPA Thought Leader Series, another very important APPA program. It is the Thought Leader Series that makes it possible for APPA to identify each year the most critical issues facing educational facilities and our campuses. The Thought Leaders findings are published each year by APPA, and they are used by our annual conference planning committee to determine our program content, in particular, the focus of our conference general sessions, as you saw this week. Today's general session is entitled, Build It, But Will They Come? The Business Case for Space. Standards and approaches for the use of campus facilities space are changing radically. What must we do to ensure that our institutions make objective and programmatic asset management decisions? Our session today will identify what is required of facility professionals to lead the campus dialogue on the use of space. After presentations from each of our panelists, Valerie Short of Jacobs will lead our panel discussion, then moderate questions and answers. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Valerie Short. She's a principal at Jacobs. She has over 20 years experience as a management services consultant to corporate real estate and facilities management organizations with Fortune 500 companies and with many of the world's largest public sector entities. Here's the part you'll want to hear. Her clients have generated over $1 billion in reoccurring savings. Valerie's clients include those in the following sectors: software, petroleum, real estate, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, higher education, and the public sector. A published author and contributor of many articles and publications on strategic facilities management, she also regularly presents and moderates panels at real estate industry conferences in the U.S. and abroad. Please join me in welcoming Valerie Short.
I'm from Virginia, so I have to start with a good morning. Thank you. Robin did a great sort of overview of what our three panelists are going to be touching on today. The format is going to be, each one of them is going to give about a 10-minute presentation, and like she said, we'll be moderating. We'll definitely be asking for you all to participate, so please step up to the mics and contribute to the discussion. So a few things just about space management, and I like to say space, the final frontier, for those Trekkies out there. We talked a lot about confronting the problem of space during the Thought Leader series, about space being in demand, that it's, oftentimes poorly measured. And we had quite a bit of discussion about data. I know you guys probably feel like you're swimming in data every day, tracking things like, utilization rates, your facilities condition assessments, CMMS, all those great things. But what our panelists are going to talk about today is sometimes swirling within all that data, you're just becoming almost like a data manager and less of a strategic planner. So what you're going to hear as a key theme kind of running through all of the presentations is thinking about space in a new way, thinking about it as an institutional asset, and hopefully giving you some ideas for how you can get a seat at the table, to make a business case for whether you need new space or not, and also utilizing the space that you have, and hopefully breaking down some space fiefdoms, which we all kind of deal with every day. So I'm going to read to you, I don't typically read when I'm up here, but I want to make sure I get the bios correct. So our first speaker today is going to be Odell Owens. He's the president with Cincinnati State Technical and Community College. Dr. Owens attended Yale University Medical School, where he earned his MD and his master's in public health simultaneously. He also completed his internship and residency in obstetrics and gynecology at Yale. He was awarded the Irving Friedman Award as the Outstanding Chief Resident in the Department of OBGYN at Yale Medical School. As a medical student, he served as president of his medical school class, captain of the medical school basketball team, and served as a member of the board of trustees at Antioch College. Dr. Owens then accepted a combined position at Harvard Medical School. He served as a clinical instructor in the Department of OBGYN at Harvard Medical School and was a fellow in reproductive endocrinology and infertility for 2 years. He then returned to his native Cincinnati in 1982 to establish the first division of reproductive endocrinology in the Department of OBGYN at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. During his 4 years that he served at the medical school, he established an in vitro fertilization program and achieved Cincinnati's first successful conception and delivery. In November 1998, Dr. Owens announced Cincinnati's first pregnancy from a frozen embryo. In August 2010, Dr. Owens was selected by the Board of Trustees of Cincinnati State Technical and Community College to be its 5th president. He currently serves as a member of the Board of Directors for the U.S. Bank, the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden, and the Greater Cincinnati Northern Kentucky International Airport. He's our first speaker today. Our second speaker will be Leith Sharp. She's the chair of Sustainable Futures Academy, and she's also an instructor at Harvard University. She's spent 20 years driving sustainability into the core business of higher education. In 1995, she established one of the world's first campus sustainability programs at the University of South Wales in Australia. In 2000, she became the founding director of Harvard's Office of Sustainability. And under her leadership, Harvard came to have one of the largest green campus organizations in the world, including a $12 million green revolving loan fund and over 80 certified green buildings. So she's a real greenie. In 2010, Leith became founding executive director for the Illinois Green Economy Network, IGEN, a partnership of 48 community colleges, presidents targeting green workforce training. She implemented a robust college collaboration that secured $25 million in funding. She's also currently the founding chair of Sustainability Futures Academy, an international collaboration focused on executive leadership development. She continues to teach sustainability change management at Harvard University, is on the editorial board for the International Journal for Sustainability in Higher Education, and consults internationally. She has an engineering degree and a master's of education from Harvard, and she's also received numerous awards for her work, including Churchill Fellowship and the Young Australian of the Year Award. Our third presenter today will be Jack Colby. He's the Assistant Vice Chancellor of Facilities at NC State University. Jack holds degrees in mechanical engineering from Virginia Tech, go Hokies, and an MBA from the school at Duke University. He's a professional engineer in North Carolina and a graduate of the APPA Institute for Facilities Management and Leadership Academy. He chairs the APPA Professional Certification Board and the Thought Leader Series that we're going to be speaking on today. At North Carolina State, Jack is responsible for the operation of 5 central utility plants, distribution systems for 3 campuses, energy management, and campus sustainability programs. He's the sustainability officer for the campus and co-chairs the campus-wide committee for sustainability, energy, and carbon reduction. So with that, I'd like to welcome our first speaker, Odell Owens.
Okay, good morning. Well, as you can see, I'm a unorthodox college president, only for 2 years, so I'm going to give you an unorthodox example of a presentation. This is an example of a public-private municipality partnership, a little bit different. When I became president 22 months ago, the board of directors told me that the city of Middletown, which is 30 miles from our campus, I'm speaking fast, I only have 10 minutes, a city 30 miles from our campus, as most Midwestern cities are devastated, they have empty buildings, and they felt that an educational institution could help revitalize their town. So they wanted a college campus in the downtown area, and they were willing to give us 5 buildings. My board said, well, go pursue that, but you can't have any money. We won't allow any money, plus you have to only have a minimal impact upon our debt ratio that is set by the state of Ohio. Well, long story short, typically, here's an example from Ohio State, where Ohio State is going to leverage 35,000 parking spaces to make almost $500 million. Those are sort of the old typical kinds of things, but they're fought with some problems in terms of you no longer control that space, your future geography of your campus may change. In this partnership, after meeting with the city, the question was who was going to float the bonds. Was I going to float the bonds? And that means debt for me. But if it went to a private developer, it also meant that we would have some debt, but some reasonable debt. We were fortunate enough to meet a partnership with a company. Now, again, I'll have to speak kind of fast and contract this. My obligation is that I pay 15% of our tuition and our subsidy. I reimburse the partner for utilities, maintenance, security of the building that we're in, and we pay for our own operational expenses. The partnership is responsible for the capital. They will get the buildings. They're going to actually buy the two of the 5 buildings from the city of Middletown. They will refurbish the buildings, but I have control of the design, and they will provide all the maintenance and security and stuff, which we will reimburse them. However, and this is where it gets a little complicated, a little unbelievable. It took us 3 months to get this past our Attorney General's office. I'm guaranteed 105% of my revenues every year. I'm guaranteed. If there's a deficit, if my revenues are less than my expenses, then the partners will provide the money and still give me my 5%. Now, the deficit will be rolled over until the next year. When we become profitable, now again, they have the building, but I have control of the design of the building. I also control the naming rights of the building, and all the money generated from the naming rights is mine. The partnership will also put up $150,000 in scholarships to aid students who will be a first-time Cincinnati State student at the Middletown campus. That means a student already enrolled at Cincinnati State can't transfer up to Middletown, to help encourage. The key for this is that it's a 20-year lease, a 20-year agreement, not a lease, 20-year agreement with 4 or 5 years extension. At the end of the 20 years, I have the option of buying the building for the price they bought from the city of Middletown. Now again, because Middletown one that's there, the price of this building, 60,000 square feet, is the best building downtown, it's $185,000. Right, so in 20 years, I'm paying nickels and a dime. I know, it's unbelievable. Now let's say, here's the key. For the part that most people don't understand, the state had a hard time. If we're not successful, we don't bring in the students. Now again, we've done our own assessment. They've done their assessment. We even have a third-party assessment that said this will work. Now our challenge is that one, on the positive side, this is the largest area in Ohio, largest community in Ohio not to have a community college. We have 23 in Ohio. However, they have a branch in the city of Miami University, which is the most prestigious of all our public institutions. But they wanted a more community college type curriculum. But if it doesn't work in 3 years or 4 years and our expenses always exceed our revenues, I walk away, I have no debt. I owe nothing. I never have a liability. And I know that sounds incredible, but it is. Part of this partnership, and I won't give you their name because I'm not done with them yet, but if you, and I told them I was making this presentation, and they didn't want to be deluged, but if you Google us, Cincinnati State, go to our website, you can get their names. The partnership of this educational group is backed by a $3 billion hedge fund. And so they're looking, and they feel that education has a good return. The uniqueness of this partnership is that because the building will be solely used for Cincinnati State, the city of Middletown won't charge them for taxes, property taxes. So again, that helps to sweeten the pot. It ensures that we get utilities, all the proper utilities to the building. There's a large area for parking space, and the city has designated us almost already 500 parking spaces that we'll have available to us for free. And although I want to own that piece of property, and I'm trying to figure a way to do that, part of the way to do that is that the culinary program is our best program at Cincinnati State, and that's not on the table for Middletown. I've held that back. And that's going to be my leverage for my next building, or to get the city of Middletown to give me 20 acres of land so that we have protection for future growth. But I think the key part is that some people say, well, boy, you're lucky to find that kind of deal. No, I think we had a great team led by some great facility people who really helped to educate me on the importance of facility and the role that they can play. So it wasn't luck, it's that old definition of opportunity meets preparation. We were prepared. But also you had a group out of Boston. They have done this in Massachusetts, nowhere else. We're the first in Ohio. They already have 2 other college campuses they're going to work with, but we have the best deal. We absolutely have the best deal. The next college campus, they're paying rent. They already have a different kind of a contract. Our deal is very, very sweet. But the key, again, on review, is that I'm guaranteed 105% of my revenues every year. Now, they get their 15%. As we grow, the performance shows that we'll hit a point which will pay probably within 3 years, possibly 2 years, but at least in 3 years, we will make a profit. They'll get their 15%. Any additional money all comes back to me. Again, we will hold for the Middletown for other kinds of development in Middletown. This is a little different because I said we were first faced with either we would float bonds, take those buildings, and we would do it, or a developer came and said they would do it, but they wanted a 15 to 20-year agreement, and if we were going to buy the building, we would have to recapture all of their costs, not only just their capital to get the building, but their renovation costs. And with them faced with paying probably almost $200,000 to $250,000 a month. And that just didn't seem like that was going to be our best deal. And so we met this group. They had the right idea because the people involved in this group ranged from a person that was Senator Ted Kennedy's chief of staff for 15 years. And you know how strongly Senator Kennedy felt about education. There were other people in this group who were being funded by the hedge fund that have been involved in education. So it was, yes, about the profit, but at the same time they had an appreciation and they understand the educational process. We're taking 60,000 square feet, and our curriculum is going to be more of a hybrid. It's going to be more online than in the classroom. That's how we can expand our range, but at the same time get away with not using a lot of facilities. I'm going to stop at this time because it's very complicated, but I hope I've broken it down to you to show that if you're willing to work hard, be patient, and take advantage of the opportunities, hopefully you can be successful as hopefully we will be. Thank you.
Morning. I just feel like singing up here with this backdrop. It's a little theatrical. The hills are alive with the sound of space planning. Okay, my angle on this is the change management challenge of looking at a paradigm shift around space management. And I'm going to cover 3 things. One thing will be the feelings of space management. The second thing will be the wickedness of space management. And the third thing will be the change management challenge of space management. So let's start with the feelings. Basically, we ultimately want to get everybody to the bottom of the curve here, where they're wondering who they are and they're deeply depressed. Because once we get them all there, we can break them through to the brave new world that we're wanting to take them to. The key point here is that there are a lot of feelings associated with space management. And we all know that instinctively. What we wish would happen when we bring up the topic of space management is this, but what really ends up happening is this. And we, in the world of facilities, continue to hope that these feelings sort of go away and that the sheer logic of our data can get people on board, and the sheer brilliance of our strategy and planning will somehow bring about this shared conscience around space management. But it rarely seems to work out that way. There's good neuroscience explaining perhaps why this is the case. When people experience feelings of betrayal and their threat response is triggered, this is actually a very profound impact on their psyche. It often happens out of sight. People won't often be very explicit about the emotional impact of their experience in meetings, in planning processes, in activities. Now, this is particularly pertinent around space management because we all know that parking spaces and space management hold a unique place in the neuroses of our organisation. So we tend to come from a culture of never mind your feelings, what are the facts? Let's get the facts out in front of people. We also tend to adopt a variety of strategies ourselves to kind of mitigate bad feelings, but it's not done overtly and it's not done consciously. So the importance of feelings in space management, we have to understand that we need to mind the feelings because they're also the facts. And we need to become more skillful and perhaps sophisticated in our grasp of how to engage people, how to create forums of engagement that foster all of these key attributes that provide security and positive emotional engagement for people. Now, this turns up in literally the moment by moment, the minute by minute experience in the group processes, in the meetings that we have, in the interactions that we have with people around the campus. Anything that I've ever been part of that succeeded accidentally stumbled its way into finally finding the right balance of these things for people that are involved. Ultimately, we're creating trust when we get this right, and trust is what enables us to reduce risk and instability as we go forward. The frightening thought for all of us is, ultimately this comes down to engaging in just a truckload of active listening. Now, actually, none of us are particularly good at active listening, and I put myself in that camp, because active listening is about sitting down with people and not offering solutions, not offering advice, but asking them very reflective questions to help them expose for themselves and for others what's really going on for them. We need to engage in very deliberate and very solid and exhaustive active listening processes as part of space management planning. Now, that then quickly brings a shudder of dread through the spines of most of us, because the thought of having to listen that much to that many people and their various problems is overwhelming. But the good news is that there's an emerging field around, you could call it group processes or social technologies, where there are a variety of structured group engagement activities that allow you to structure people to listen to each other and to engage in a different mode of creative interaction and creative problem solving. So the utilization of emerging social technologies, whether they are group problem solving processes like open space technology, these are literally ways of convening people differently to our typical committee or strategic planning process that are proving to have remarkable benefits for fostering large-scale engagement and eventually arriving at shared purpose around very complex problems. Secondly, wickedness. So we are dealing with a wicked problem here, and this is why it's so very difficult for all of us. Wicked problems are ones that are difficult or impossible to solve because of incomplete, contradictory and changing requirements that are often difficult to recognise. So we've got two facets to this in our space management dilemma. One is the fact that many different stakeholders on our campuses have quite different definitions of what effective space management is to them. They're also appearing to behave quite irrationally in overbooking and not being particularly transparent about the fact that they've booked 3 rooms but they only need 1, all this kind of stuff. But when you look at their own real experience in the organisation, they're behaving quite rationally in the face of uncertainty and risk that turns up during the academic planning process, timetabling and room allocation. So the second dimension of wickedness for all of us is the big question of the future of higher education and these powerful emerging trends redefining the 21st century university and college. Each of these trends, from transdisciplinarity to a shift towards co-creation of the learning and research experience, to action learning or learning by doing, deciding by doing, permeability and greater synergies, each of these have quite profound implications for space management and space provision. So in the face of these two sort of dimensions of our wickedness, we find ourselves needing to ask the question, are our organisations currently designed in a way that prepares them to solve wicked problems? And if we think of our organisations themselves as technologies, is there something that we could be rethinking about the very nature of the design of our organisations? Well, there are a couple of things. One, the way in which we do governance, we do tend to separate out the process of strategy and planning from the process of implementation and doing. The future sees this as being an iterative, merged process of decision making. 2, we need to do a better job at getting the system in the room. We do not currently quite understand who all the players are in the space decision-making process. There are probably more players than we are currently accounting for and designing into our space planning decision-making processes. 3, we need to be doing a better job at enhancing group intelligence, and we know from the research that we can enhance group intelligence by doing 3 things at least. 1 is having greater social sensitivity or emotional awareness, which gets back to the feelings issue. 2 is facilitating group processes, decision-making processes in a way that balances the input of all stakeholders. And 3, having more women engaged in these processes. Ultimately, I hear the clap. I love that clap. Ultimately, we're talking about the moment-to-moment upping the ante on our ability to facilitate true and effective group processes. The final point about where the fundamental organizational design change comes into is this larger idea of democratize this dilemma. Don't hold it in your own camp as your problem to solve. This is a community problem. So in the 20th century, our approach might have been to plan our way out of a dilemma like this. The 21st century is to process our way out of it, to design new engagement processes, and to offer people tools like a balanced scorecard where other people are brought into play to help decide where we're going to arrive on a fairly complicated decision around cost benefits, pros, cons, and trade-offs. So democratizing this dilemma by fostering a new kind of engagement process across the institution. And this leads us to our third point, which is the change management challenge. Any of us bringing about any substantial change in our institutions tend to come upon these key barriers to effective change. We have learnt in the sustainability area that you have to tackle all 4 of these areas in order to bring about effective change. You've got to get the individuals on board, you've got to deal with their feelings and their personal values and attitudes. You have to foster social dynamics that maximize group intelligence, that bring about group thinking processes and democratizing the dilemmas for people. You need the right organizational systems, plannings, metrics, data collection, and then you obviously need the infrastructure with the quality of space. In order to really address this, it's helpful to think about change management as having distinctive phases. The first phase is awakening, which is about getting it on the agenda. You get it on the agenda in all the different groups around the institution. You transition from awakening to pioneering once enough people are on board with the dilemma and they're engaged in collaborating to solve it, and they might even be out there achieving some little victories. You then move into pioneering when the number of engaged people that are on board with you to help solve this shared dilemma, there's an acceleration of interest, involvement, capability and confidence, and the executive level commitments start to become more elaborate. During pioneering, what you're largely engaged in is using the powerful force of relationships to foster huge volumes of attitudinal shifts. And this is really the underbelly of change. At a certain point, your pioneering efforts hit the transformation phase where you can't go any further before you have to deal with deep institutional incentives or disincentives working against you. At the transformation phase, this is where space planning becomes an organizing principle. It's not just an add-on. It doesn't just have to fit into existing decision-making processes, existing governance structures, but rather it has now become a dilemma that helps you define new processes across the institution that are much more successful in engaging people, fostering shared purpose, and navigating the very complex nature of this dilemma and democratizing a shared responsibility for the outcome. Thank you.
Well, I don't know about you, but as a facility manager, all this talk about feelings and change and everything just gives me the heebie-jeebies. But I do have to admit to you that the talk about being wicked has a little bit of attractiveness there. So, ready to go. Let's face it. What we're talking about here is, aside from our human resource on our campuses, the largest single asset that we have out there. You look at the latest numbers, over 1.3 trillion, with a B, with a T, dollars in terms of our current replacement value for all of our assets. We need to be talking about the business case for this. I think up here on the slide you see, and you can relate to these sorts of things that you see as you go out on your campus, particularly the multiple offices for faculty members, the emeriti faculty that nobody's seen for about a decade, and yet they have an office and it's lined with books and nobody enters the Hallett Hall. We see laboratories that look like they're from 1940. And the same faculty has occupied those labs, even though the level of their active research and the amount of revenue that they're bringing in has dropped dramatically. 24/7 operations, in case somebody wants to come in on the weekends or at night and work. All of these things are models that we've inherited that we can see going on there. My favorite is the room that we walked into, and there was actually furniture in it and papers on the desk and a book on the bookshelf to make it look like it was occupied. And in fact, we found nobody had been in it for over a year. So, well, what's the problem? Let's face it, as we think about the bigger picture of higher education and what's happening out there and in terms of access and cost and accountability, we have to be able to look at this from perspective of the community, of the people that we serve. We see that these costs are continuing to rise and escalating rates, driving up all of the numbers and the total cost of higher education. Our students are coming out of school with debt burdens unforeseen in the past. And with this, as our institutions try to compete for students, guess what? We're out there building rec centers, athletic facilities, student unions, everything you can think of, incurring more and more debt that is, again, adding to the total cost of education. We just think of it's different because it's over here in the fee column. Amazingly enough, if you just go back to school and university, the latest records on capital construction, they're indicating that although there was a slight decline, that still 60% of the reinvestment in capital expenditures and the likes of that is going towards new construction, even at a time when we've been through a huge economic upturn. At the same time, we're looking at our assets, and if we talk with Dr. Ira Fink with SCUP, he tells us that overall our general utilization is less than 50%. How can we substantiate practice like that? So really, what's at stake? Interesting figure that in 2003 we had 2 colleges that cost over $40,000 a year to attend. Just in those 6 years until 2009, that number has risen to 224 institutions. And as you're sitting on the outside of our industry and looking in, and particularly on the federal side of subsidizing higher education, you've got to be questioning what's happening here. Are these people out of control? I think that we should learn. We talk about the decade of the 1990s being the lost decade. And that was when we saw a major transformation in technology. And guess what? We can now see the results of that in terms of what happened with journalism, music, book publishing. Borders now bankrupt, out of business. Amazon taking over. We've got newspapers declining to the point where some are going out of business because of electronic media. Book publishing has completely changed in terms of its approach, how it's done, the types of employees and staffing that they look at. So are we next? I mean, we're just going along believing that this can continue in the likes of that. I think we need to be stepping back and looking at the situation, determining what needs to happen. All of us look at a situation in terms of what's in it for me. And on an institutional level, we see some interesting data coming out now. Algonquin College did a particular effort that they called space mining. And they went out and to support their growth, they identified over 30% of additional capacity within their existing space inventory. We look at reduced operating costs. All of us are burdened. Operating costs have gone up dramatically over the last few years, and we know that in many cases, as we look at our building models and what we're talking about with total cost of ownership, we know that only 20% of the cost of the building is in its initial construction. And so operating cost has continued to be a dramatic burden on our campuses. We know that if our administration can see the ability to be able to reallocate resources or to put money towards backlog needs and the likes of that, that's going to be a tremendous impetus to be able to make things happen. And these sorts of changes really need to happen at the top. I put decreased demand for campus services because in many cases, what's happening with our space management or lack of it is really driving additional expenditures as well. We're starting to see the scheduling of classes where we peak out in this 9 o'clock in the morning to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, guess what? You've got to have the parking facilities to be able to do that. We're continuing to burden people with more and more debt for parking structures, lots, and the likes of that. You're now peaking out all of your dining facilities, and so you're having to spend more money to expand those. And then your library facilities also are seeing the types of peak demand on them. And yet all of this can be dealt with through effective space management and utilization. In many cases, we're still dealing with what everybody thought of in the last decades, that quantity is everything. Get all the space you can, regardless of the quality. And really, that's a very dangerous position to be. So when we look at what's wrong with the system, we go in and we say, look at things, and we're still back in the Socratic method of delivery of education. All of the students sitting around listening to the learned professor up front, and sometimes sitting around a tree, but more often in a high-tech classroom, the likes of that. And this has all occurred, in these organized, scheduled times and the likes of that, as opposed to what we're now beginning to see in terms of new mechanisms of learning and the types of delivery mechanisms that they're doing through interactive group after-hours learning, that sort of thing. We actually find that our scheduling of delivery in terms of 2 semesters a year goes back to our roots of our country in terms of being able to be sure that all the kids were back home in order to bring in the crops. And so now we continue with this, and everybody goes home for the summer. Our facilities sit empty and underutilized while everybody goes back to work on the farm. How many people operate a farm here? So how do we need to think about this? We also know that, in particular, most of the space that we see on our campuses is attributed to a particular college or a department or function, and a lot of that space then becomes part of their management. And so in many cases, space is power, and that means the more space you have, the more power you have, the more influence you have with the administration and the likes of that. And in fact, most of that space is administered within these groups that hold it under very tight control and is no longer available as an institutional asset. We also know that here, with such low utilization, everybody is still enthralled with the prospect of seeing all of the cranes over their campus and showing that as a sign of progress and growth and something to brag about to their peers. How many of you, when a chief executive retires, talk about how many buildings they renovated? No. Their kudos will be that they delivered this many buildings of new construction and expanded the campus by 100%. Again, what are we recognizing in terms of that? All of this driving increased amounts of debt burden on our campus and refocusing away from the core mission. As we look at this, I think because of our counting mechanisms and all, many of our occupants view the space as free. They don't have to pay the utility bills, they don't have to pay for the upkeep, the likes of that, and therefore, why not more? And so, until we begin to look at these things, examining them, and be able to deal with some of these reverse incentives and everything, we're going to be totally trying to tweak a broken system. So I think we know growth is still with us. There's a tremendous built-up demand. How are we going to meet this in terms of the current environment? I dare say that management of space receives a much smaller level of attention than just about anything on our campuses. We will go to great lengths to be sure that all pencils and tablets in the storeroom are tracked on a daily basis and only issued to those that absolutely need them. And yet, a $1.3 trillion asset sits out there with a minimal level of effort in terms of its management. I think it also just makes sense that as we advance the conversation about sustainability and about its benefit over the long term to our institutions, that space be a part of that discussion. So what do we need to do? We need to step back from this. We need to be able to begin thinking about things in a very different way. This is not going to be putting small Band-Aids on it, about going and having a discussion with a couple people. It's going to be the larger discussion to be able to advance the issue. And so making space an institutional priority, bringing it up to the point where it's receiving its due in terms of our total management, putting the practices in place, data-driven decision-making, putting a structure in place to be able to make decisions and the likes of that is all going to be the enabling parts of this that make it work. For that, we really need to change the business model, and that is leveraging this great asset that we have, and how do we make that work for us to be able to advance our institutional mission. We need the policies and procedures and structure in place. I heard one campus that had a space committee of 37 members. Can you imagine trying to get consensus on anything? Space management needs to occur from the top. And the closer to the top, the better, and it needs to be data-driven. And so to be able to install these types of systems in our campus, there has to be a fairness about it. As Leith talked about, it needs to be part of the overall discussion and the likes of that to be able to engage people in this and to be able to prove that their interests are going to be best served by a better management structure. In fact, we need to change the culture. And that means a new paradigm. And it means that we need to challenge the old ways and let everybody understand that this is not something that they're going to be harmed with. We need to take the fear factor out of it and be open about this and show the institutional benefit that's going to accrue. So as we move towards space as an asset and a new model that everybody can understand, then we can look and see what the metrics are and expose those to the campus and be sure that everybody understands now the new paradigm and how this is going to benefit our institutions. So I think we all try to imagine a university in the future. And I can see one where if we do these things, if we do it right, if we begin the discussion now and talk about the issues that affect our institutions, the likes of that, that we can actually change the model in terms of reinvestment. And we can create higher levels of quality space, maybe reduced levels of quality space, but the space we do have will be much higher quality level, accelerating our renewal, diminishing our backlog for needs, moving ahead with our environmental programs and our commitments on climate, the likes of that, and really showing that we're accountable and that we are good stewards of the assets with which we're entrusted. So I think in terms of us, we need to be part of the discussion, and we cannot sit back and wait for this to happen. Perhaps we can't control at the facilities level the whole process, but we have an integral part of the solution. And so beginning to have the discussion on your campus and all can be benefited by discussion of some of these topics and bringing these things to bear on your campus. Thank you.
So with that, we were going to open it up to questions. I don't see anyone right now at the microphone. So I'll ask our panelists, what kinds of innovations do you think will help close the gap and move space management from its current state to where it should be 10 years from now? So anybody want to take a first shot at that? Leith, you want to, or Jack?
I think technology is going to be key here because if we can have an open system that's data-driven and where the information is available to the community and the likes of that, I think there's going to be elimination of the fear that everything happens in a smoke-filled room. I guess that's an old term. But in a room where they don't have the ability to understand the system and it happens on a political basis, that it's who you know instead of your actual need.
So much more transparent.
I think transparency of not only the process, but of the decision-making structure and everything will help everybody participate.
One of the things we're looking at is to really cost out all our programs, and including space, and then align that with our student success. Community colleges historically were judged by how many students you brought in the front door. Now community colleges are being judged by retention rate and graduation rates, and they're low. So now we're aligning our budget and our resources towards student success. So by costing out the programs, there are going to be people who claim this was their territory or their space, may want to give some of that up because it's going to impact the budget if they're not using it correctly.
Leith, do you want to talk a little bit about, you talked quite a bit about cultural change management, and obviously inside of higher education, there's that legacy culture there. And some of the things, while yes, the data is there, you don't want to just be the data wonk. So how could you use some of the tips and tools that you gave in your presentation to help facilitate that discussion as well and hopefully bring on a little bit more cultural change at a higher level within your organization?
Yeah. Well, I think building on what my colleagues just mentioned, in addition to that, I think the key opportunity for us is really to create new platforms of engagement within our institutions that are designed to allow people to have their say, maybe not to have their way, but to effectively have their say, to really feel that they've been heard around this issue, because this is a lightning bolt issue and everybody's got a horse in this race. And no matter how much great data we put out and how much brute logic we use around money, there are people, a lot of people in our organizations, they don't care about the money and the data, they care about their research. They care about getting their students into a high quality teaching space, and that's the incentive that they're working around. So we have to create engagement processes that allow for these multiple agendas to converge into a shared purpose of balancing those and democratizing having a say about what is the right balance for our institution when. Because if we centralize this decision at the top, we are all laying ourselves wide open to being shot down by powerful faculty, powerful donors and others. If we design an engagement process that allows everybody to take some shared responsibility with a balanced end decision that is iterating over the years, because the other thing is this is a moving target as well. What excellent space management looks like this year is going to be radically different in 5 years' time. So engagement processes connected to good data, connected to the business case that democratizes responsibility for dilemma.
I think we have a question. Can you state your name and where you're from?
Yeah, I'm Marty Altschul from Carnegie Mellon. Until Leith mentioned the word quality about a minute ago, I didn't hear that in the conversation. It was all about quantity. And I was just wondering, how much do you think the issues with relation to space management and ownership have to do with quantity of space, and how much has to do with quality of space?
Jack?
Well, I think we have to look at what our incentive models are. In many cases, as I mentioned, all of the metrics and everything in terms of benefits to colleges and the likes of that came through quantity. And as we rethink this whole issue, we should be stressing quality. Think about the fact that if you're a faculty member, in order to really optimize your use of classroom space based on the size of your class and your student population for that semester, you need to get in the right room. In many of our campuses, there are smart classrooms and there are dumb classrooms. And you always wonder whether you're going to get one of the worst ones. And so just think and imagine a university where all of the teaching spaces are of the same high quality and that we've reinvested them so that we can effectively manage them, the likes of that. And that is a benefit that accrues to everyone. And so if we can raise the general level of quality, the likes of that, that is a definite incentive to everyone to be able to participate.
I think we talked a lot at Thought Leaders about space design standards, which was what you were getting at, and allowing for the space to be flexibly used, which allows for better utilization as well. So I think that was also definitely a key theme that came out of it. You want to talk about that, Lee?
Yeah, building on Jack's point around quality, quality for office space, for example, because one of the points that you made on Monday was that something like 30% of space is office space.
Yeah.
Average. So it's not just the teaching space that we're optimizing. We've seen concrete examples of people being willing to give up quantity for improved quality office space, natural daylighting, control over ventilation. So this is where that engagement process where you can offer people, look, you can have quantity if you want to keep it the way you are, or we can redirect our business model to perhaps invest a little more in quality and less in quantity. And for the most part, people will shift to that position if they're effectively engaged.
Well, folks always want new. I mean,
they want new, but even if you're renovating to really improve daylighting, access, ventilation, and
in fact, we have some really good case studies like University of Washington where they did some calculations to show that if they tried to accomplish better space management through just their normal capital reinvestment level, that it would take decades to implement this fully. And in fact, what the carrot that they put out there is the reinvestment in the facilities to be able to accelerate the entire process. So they committed the resources to make these things happen on an accelerated level so that the people involved now in making the commitments could actually receive the benefits in their career and their span of time at the institution.
think we have another question. Hi, Glenn.
Glenn Smith, and besides all my involvement here in APPA, I have a real job.
And you're also at Thought Leaders.
And I was at Thought Leaders, that's correct. But I'm the director of facilities at Bryn Mawr College. For those of you not familiar, it's a small liberal arts school for women near Philadelphia. And we have made a commitment to no additional net square footage over the next 10 years. And that's part of our commitment to sustainability. Whether we can hold true to that remains to be seen. And that, I guess, gets to my concern, and a lot of what you've talked about, is this issue of culture change. And my experience with culture change is that more often than not, it requires a real crisis to bring about considerable culture change. And we're dealing with educational institutions where we have kind of the autonomy of the faculty that don't want to be governed. And so much of what actually happens in terms of any culture change depends on the leadership at the top. And I'm just wondering whether Lyth or anyone else can address real experiences where culture change can actually take place from the grassroots level, from a lower level in the organization where most of us reside, where we recognize the need for it and can move upward instead of relying on the leadership to push it downward. Any comments on that?
Anyone?
Yep. I mean, there are a lot of examples in the sustainability higher ed movement of grassroots-led culture change in our organizations, where some of the key building blocks were small pilot projects that were then used to galvanize support that eventually led to greater and greater executive commitment, using peer-to-peer interaction where people that had been party to a successful pilot became the advocates for others. So there are a lot of successes around grassroots-led culture change. I'm interested, your point made me think of culture change as it relates to the finance folks, because one of the challenges that we have around this is our institutions have an established set of finance decision-making processes around, look, if you want to build a new building, here's what we have to do to raise the capital, here's who has to approve it. Now, if we want to invest that scale of funding into space management, like a 10-year plan of where's the decision-making process for that, and how do finance people value that kind of investment? Because I have a sneaking suspicion that our finance and accounting folks, from the very top tiers of executive leaders down, they don't have an established finance decision-making process that would allow for the kind of investment that you need to pull off that kind of goal. Whereas if you were to propose, hey, we need a new building, they're a lot more comfortable in that process. So I think culture change has to happen in different parts of the organization. And grassroots, I think we have a lot of great examples. Culture change in the finance decision-making area is a slipperier fish for us at this point, and perhaps needs a lot more focus and some very deliberate conversations with finance folks around how do you value investment in space management as opposed to investment in new construction, and can we equalize that?
Any other comments? One of the things you talked about, Odell, was sort of this alternative financing model. Obviously, you're creating new, which I can tell you my firm obviously would be happy with that. It's hard for me to come up here and talk about not wanting to create new as an architect. But, and it was funny during the discussion when we had the Thought Leader series, as I recall, someone said, I think, Lander, that the less costly building is the one you don't build, or the cheapest building is the one that you don't build. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about maybe the financial considerations and driving forces that should help drive the institutional thinking and planning for investments, in how you're creating and improving the space. And whether that be adaptive reuse or, you know, in your case, because you were constructing new, an alternative financing model, I mean, definitely maybe some outside the box thinking, which was sort of what you were getting at, versus sort of the just, okay, let's dip into the endowment fund, or we have this, how do we use it? Let's go ahead and put our name on a new building. How can you, what are some of the financial strategies and maybe some of the discussion that you could have to give folks some food for thought?
Well, I sort of have my eye on 62 acres in Cincinnati. The Avon, and please don't laugh at anything I'm going to say. And remember, I'm only 22 months into this. I'm a little naive. The Avon Company closed their headquarters outside of Cincinnati. It was 1.1 million square feet of a building, 700,000 in warehouse, the rest in office space, 62 acres. So they put it on the market for $14 million. So I called them up and said, would you give it to us? Yes, I got the same reaction from them. But then I'm trying to figure out, but I would love to have this building because I think it would secure our future, but allow us, because we're very big in workforce development. And so I talked to a bank. And again, as a community college in Cincinnati, we don't have any status. Our endowment is $2 million. The University of Cincinnati has $1 billion endowment, 40,000 students. They get all the play, all the money. We're just a little small school that puts people to work, though. 90% of graduates from community college stay in the area as opposed to 60%. But I went and talked to a bank about the property, just in some general terms, and said, you know, it would be really nice to put your name on that building. But I knew that this bank had been upset with the University of Cincinnati because they gave the University of Cincinnati $5 million to build a dome over the football field. And they really didn't get anything in return. And what I've done is sort of let all of our financial contracts expire and not renew them. So that means our credit cards, our loans, our businesses is open. An ability to come in and to provide financial literacy to 20,000 students is now on the table. So now they're willing to talk to a community college because it's not just a handout, it's a business deal.
Right.
I'm going to turn it into a business deal. And what I've said to them, they said, well, wow, $14 million. I said, look, you don't have to give it to me all at once. You're a bank. Give me a mortgage and forgive the mortgage every year. So you can take that and spread it out because you're a bank. Give me a 30-year mortgage, and it doesn't cost you. It's not really $14 million up front. So I think you got to be a little bit more creative, willing to reach out, engage the community, and you're going to have to tack in a little bit of business to it as well. At least we will in Cincinnati.
Okay. Jack, what about you? I mean, how are you looking at sort of revamping your financial discussion inside of this envelope of space management?
Well, I think we've expanded the discussion on it in terms of the fact that we need to make capital reinvestment anyway. And so does it become, in terms of just a scattered first need, is there a focus? Does everybody understand what the level playing field looks like? Then we're beginning to look at other avenues like indirect costs from research, of bringing contributions to be able to deal with upgrades of facilities and systems and the likes, to be able to do that. And then thinking about these other models that we've not had to do before. Many of our states, the old go to the legislature with your hand out and get a building, those days are gone. And so we're going to have to be able to think about more innovative ways of doing it. And yet if we don't provide the structure and the strategy framework about this, what happens when the next donor comes in and says, I'd like to build a building? Well, we can't accept your donation because we don't build new buildings now. Well, no. So if they understand ahead of time what the need is and how we would utilize those funds and leverage them and the likes of that, it's again benefiting the institution just in a different way.
Val, can I?
There's a question?
Sure.
I'm Mamta Borkar. I'm an architect and a recent graduate of the master's program in sustainable design at Philadelphia University. So during the course, we learned a lot about adaptive design and the high road and the low road steward brand model. So there's always this constant conflict between the high road and the low road design of space utilization as per the steward brand model. What I would like to know is how impactful is this to an institution's mission, especially for universities that believe in high-road experiential design spaces?
So I think the question was more around utilization and the design approach?
Yes, in terms of how important it is to align your mission with some universities which believe in more monumental designs and space utilization. So how easy or difficult is that cultural change to be able to impact to something as what we're discussing today?
Jack?
Well, it's amazing that even in this day, we're still designing buildings, working with a building committee.
Yeah.
And so you get a design input from the faculty on a current pedagogy, and we design custom facilities for the group that's on the building committee. And in terms of long-term flexibility and reuse and reprogramming on a very nimble scale, this totally runs counter. We've seen much better models in terms of looking at a modularized approach to laboratories and classrooms, scale-up classrooms, learning centers, other things that can be adapted very easily to differing class sizes and different instructional methods. And I think all of us, when we're looking at that, we don't have to not involve the building committees and the likes of that. But what if there was a set of goals and guidelines in terms of our overall gains for flexibility and adaptability? I think everybody can understand how that contributes to sustainability in terms of not only conservation of capital, but not having to completely gut out buildings every few years, and to be able to really look at that as an overall total cost of ownership.
Thank you.
We have another question from the audience.
Yeah, Mike Johnson, University of Arkansas. I participated in the Thought Leaders this spring as well, and I compliment everybody for taking on this particular issue. I would ask you, if you've laid out a bunch of pieces, needs to be put into some type of a process. I would think what we've been doing with climate action plans in sustainability might give us a model for the space action plan, where we look at near-term space mining to create from whole what we have right now. We look at renovation as midterm, longer term, maybe online, maybe doing other things. The focus still needs to stay on the student. We talk about debt. What do we measure? We measure 6-year graduation rates. Why the hell aren't we measuring 4-year graduation rates or 3.5-year graduation rates? Summer, intersessions. You've brought it up. We don't use our facilities.
Yeah.
How do we figure it out? How do we deal with Dead Friday? How do we deal with 9 to 2, 7:30 to 10? We're doing labs Sunday afternoon. May not be the best, but we're using the space because we're waiting to build more. Well, we don't want to build more. Let's see what we can do. But I think some type of a space action plan. We've talked about a bunch of things that can be put together. Change management is going to be huge because the culture has been there for a long time on who owns what, how do they do it. IT has to be a part of this because part of that classroom is the smart piece, and all of them. Every student is entitled to a baseline degree and access to technology, not dumb classrooms or smart classrooms, and then sprinkle around ones that are reconfigurable, the seminar rooms, flat screens on all the walls, whatever. But I think there's a huge opportunity for us to work on this within the sustainability envelope and a similar approach, and I'd be interested in some thoughts.
Yeah. Any comments from the panel?
Well, I would say first, again, looking at my short experience, you have to really engage the faculty. And that's a speed that may not necessarily meet the speed that I want to see things done. Let me give you an example. Because again, you're under the pressure of the board of trustees. The president's their only employee. And let me give you an example. University of Tennessee, they went from a 25% retention rate to an 80% retention rate by going to block scheduling. And by doing block scheduling, they could tell a cohort of students, you're in class Monday through Friday from 9 to 12, and you're in class from 1 to 5. Well, for community college, that allows those students to know when they can work and how to take care of their family care needs. So we went to our faculty, and the first thing I got was, oh, well, I enjoy teaching in the afternoon. It wasn't about the students, what the faculty want. So that becomes now a real, and I have to be careful that it stays as a faculty issue, it doesn't become a union issue. Because again, if we can just raise our graduation rates, retention rates by going to block scheduling, better use of our campus, maybe a better use of our parking facilities. But it's going to take an engagement of the faculty, which then really slows down the process.
But I think what you're getting at, Odell, is that's challenging the status quo and considering an asset management solution and looking at facilities as a support to the organization and as an asset. And so maybe it means that, like you said, you need to look at block scheduling and challenge what was the status quo. Any other comments from our panelists, Jack or Leith?
I love that parallel. There's a lot to be milked from that fundamental idea that it could perhaps follow a similar process to how climate action plans have emerged as a legitimate process. I think the missing piece for us so far is how do we create a shared purpose around space management? Because climate change, we have all arrived at a shared purpose to avoid climate disturbance. And the shared purpose dialogue could be extremely rich and gets back to what is sort of out there. And we're all aware that the future of higher education is fundamentally at risk at this point in time, the forces and the competitive challenge ahead. So space management is a very tangible way to get people engaged in a dialogue about the future of higher ed and how does that look physically for us, because it's a lot of our challenges around creating shared purpose are if it's too abstract for people, we just can't arrive with enough stakeholders agreeing around the table. But if we used space planning as a portal to get into some of these larger discussions about the future of our university, the future of our college in a changing world, we may well be able to arrive at something meaningful and shared that then lends itself to a climate action strategy type approach. But that shared purpose step is the key one, and that's where we lose the faculty if we don't do it right, and they're not on board. So mechanisms to create shared purpose that may well take us beyond the specific topic of shared space, of space management, but that real energize and charge the issue for everybody.
Okay. Mike's not there anymore, yeah. But I don't think you can have the discussion and show that your campus is committed to sustainability without including the space management issue within it. It is so embedded in terms of energy, climate action, conservation of resources and the likes of that it's got to be part of it. In most cases, the campuses that have made large commitments to sustainability have already built the base of support among the stakeholders and their faculty senates and their staff senates and the likes of that. And so it seems a logical next step in the conversation to be able to engage them into these next levels of decision and putting these processes in place. I think it certainly means that it increases the number of stakeholders, but I think that having a common purpose and a rally point around sustainability and reallocation of resources to accomplish the institution's mission are some really strong factors out there that can drive this whole process.
I think we have another question from the audience.
Yeah, I think I was just going to support what Jackie said right now about, trying to put space management as part of the whole sustainability goal. And one thing that I think is missing in the energy for space management is that for sustainability, the students were the driving force. they demanded it, they created the energy, and then the faculty got on board. I mean, I'm sure, it started with people thinking it was going to go away, and it never did, and got all the executives' attention that every university now has some kind of sustainability action plan, and they're aggressively going in and implementing different things. So I think this is a point where we need to kind of look at where the energy is and trying to engage that as part of, because if you come in with a new thing, there's already a rolling ball, and most people are focused on sustainability without looking at what are the key components, which space management is for your energy use, for your water use, for anything that you can think of. So it's trying to get into that and making it as part of the critical core to achieve those outcomes in sustainability.
Jack?
I'll just give you a personal story. When my own son was going through NC State, he told me one semester, and he came to me and very proud of himself for his scheduling, that he had scheduled everything that he was taking on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And that gave him the long weekends and opportunity to go everywhere except be at school.
To recover on Monday.
Yeah. And so it's not just about the faculty and when they want to teach and do research and the likes of that.
It's about the consumer.
It's part of the consumer. And yet we've gone in with this one-size-fits-all, this many dollars per credit hour, no matter when it's taught and the likes of that. And in fact, if there is a true cost to supporting these peak delivery times during the middle of the day and the likes of that, then our examples from outside industry is why not create a tiered pricing structure? Why not charge more for during peak times, delivery and classes, and then incentives for off-peak? The same thing for faculty. Perhaps there's a mechanism to incent faculty to be able to teach in the off times, the likes of that. So it doesn't become...
So transfer of the cost savings for energy and running the facility to the consumer.
Well,
I mean,
or
it's a simple...
if you talk now to faculty groups, you will find that the tenured professors will teach when they want to. The tenure track faculty will teach all of the other times when nobody else wants to teach. So there's a little bit of a caste system, a hierarchy in terms of how this is done. And I think if we attack those groups and challenge our faculty to come up with the mechanisms to be able to achieve these goals, that's going to be a win-win for everyone.
Any other comments? We have another question. Hi, Ted.
Hi, Ted Widener, University of Nebraska, Lincoln. Also a participant in the Thought Leaders series. I think we keep trying to find the silver bullet, when in reality we probably need silver buckshot. I seem to recall reading that a state where they mandated fixed tuition for 4 years was showing that their 6-year graduation rates were improving greatly because the students were not interested in getting a really big tuition increase when year 5 rolled around. And there are some institutions, I think they're mostly private right now, that are talking about 3-year programs. What is it about those of us on the E&G side where we haven't figured out what our colleagues in the housing areas have figured out on keeping their facilities full in summers?
Comments?
Well, in Ohio, our subsidy is based on our graduation rates. For the 4-year schools, the community college is on a retention. So if we don't meet certain goals, we're going to get less money. So we certainly have that internal incentive. The state of Ohio put the public colleges on a 4-year, you could not raise the tuition. And the schools struggled because at the same time, the community colleges were already at a very low tuition. As I said earlier, my tuition is $4,000 a year. Not much room to wiggle with at $4,000. And we think it's still a tremendous bargain, even when we raised our tuition to $4,200. We also went to 5 terms. We were a little unusual in that we were 5 terms, again, trying to meet that consumer needs and getting people to graduate a little bit faster. The state of Ohio now has told all the schools that this September, all of the community colleges and 4-year schools must be on a semester system. So that has hurt us at the same time, because students have sort of initially pulled back because they were on a quarter system. They couldn't start any sequential courses because they didn't think they could finish in time when we went to semesters. So there are a lot of things you sort of have to juggle with that as an incentive to get students in and out. So what we did to get students to finish on the 4-year, I forgave past loans. We called students that had dropped out, and because they couldn't re-register because they had debts, we forgave those, I think, with the oldest less than $200 to come back to get those students in, and we did see a surge. So you're right, money does talk, but you got to figure where you can do it. We're limited by the state on how much money we can forgive a student. You actually have to get a true waiver by the state of Ohio. We stretched it, so don't turn me in.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a great example of incentive structures that may be overt or covert. And going back to this idea of, if we look at our organizations as technologies, as machines, it's about taking, as if you were pulling apart the engine of a car, to really understand, well, what are the forces at play that are driving these practices, these choices, these priorities? We don't do a lot of that deep institutional diagnostic work to really understand from various stakeholders' viewpoints what incentives are driving their behaviors, their priorities. This is a change management function, and there are a slew of change management activities that have to be resourced to really accelerate progress on this. Diagnostic of underlying incentives, the creation of engagement processes, the support and development of pilot projects, the development of new governance and decision-making processes. All of this comes under the banner of change management labor. And if we are not literally investing in teams of change management experts to come in and help tease out this very complicated, wicked problem, we will find it sitting on our desk at the end of very long days with very little time to actually keep chipping away at what is a very substantial body of work that has to occur in our organization. So that then brings us back to the business model question. When and how will our organizations make that investment in the change management labor that needs to occur to enable us to move forward?
One other question for our panel. We talked a lot about finances, but I wanted to ask you, how could service levels and quality be improved through enhancements to space management? So beyond sort of the financial considerations, what can you offer the users of your space as far as an improvement to quality or your services that you're providing them? Anybody want to take a crack at that one?
I have like a loopy idea that I've just had for a while. And what better association than APPA to bring this to? But what if there was a concept developed of the virtual building where you literally articulated the case for, we are going to establish X square feet of space in our institution by tapping unused space, retrofitting it, renovating it, and taken as a total whole, it's the equivalent of building a new building. And you take that to your state agency or whoever your funding entity is and say, we want capital for a virtual building. Here's what it'll cost, here's what we get. Now that's a way of tapping into existing finance approval processes, appealing to existing sensibilities about what it means to build a new building, but you're actually leveraging that funding to go in and improve services, improve quality across your existing infrastructure to utilize unused or underutilized space a lot better. If it were all packaged into a virtual building unit, might that give us an entree into a new way of accessing the capital that we need to pull it off?
Interesting thought.
And if
Jack?
APPA were to say, yeah, we like that concept, we're going to validate it, I mean, Someone would have to believe it, wouldn't they?
Go ahead, Jack.
Well, I think it opens up when you have this conversation about the virtual new building. It also allows people to understand the leveling of the playing field. Many of our campuses, we have rich colleges and poor colleges, and typically the ones that bring in all the big research grants and the likes of that have a great deal to spend. Others in social sciences and the likes of that may not. And so if all colleges were able to look at this on an institutional level and achieve benefits of raising the quality of their instructional and laboratory spaces and being able to get a fair share, if you will, through this process as opposed to having to come up with their own funding to be able to do these things, I think that's going to engage a lot more people on the campus and look at this as a way to move things forward on an institutional level.
Anybody else? Odell?
No. Okay. He's got it.
No more questions? Let's talk a little bit about tools and processes and maybe some industry best practices. Odell, you talked a little bit about your alternative financing. Jack, anything, I mean, you've talked a little bit about some ideas at Washington State. Anything you want to share as far as, especially with this cultural change? I mean, obviously, getting a seat at the table is sometimes a little challenging. What can you use? What are some good tools and best practices to start facilitating that change?
Well, I would say implementing a set of procedures and the likes of that are highly transparent, visible, everybody understands how it's run. And then the decision structure so that everybody can understand that as well. And they will, if it's run in an effective manner, it will not be all politically driven. It will be based on need, and it will be based on justification. We found that it works very effectively to have a support staff that is independent of all of the different users of the facilities and bring a very objective perspective to the decision process. So identification of need, the importance of programs, recommendations on how to address those space needs, then come up through that process, and then the dialogue can occur with the presenting departments and then the staff presenting the objective view and recommendations. So that's been a very good success story and perhaps a structure that others would want to look at.
Well, I think with that, we're kind of running out of time, so I'm going to bring Robin back to do a little closeout. Thanks so much to our panelists. Great discussion, great presentation. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, there you've heard it. We all do have shared purposes, and that is a big reason that we all come together and organize regionally and come together annually for these great meetings where we can address these wicked problems that we all face in a variety of issues, from space management to deferred maintenance to energy efficiency, and all the great sessions and things that our presenters have put on all week. So thank you. What a great session. I want to thank our session panelists and our moderator, Valerie Short, President Odell Owens, Leith Sharp, and Jack Colby. Again, another round of applause for them for this great session. I have a few closing remarks and word of thanks to share with you, but before I do that, let me remind you to mark your calendars for next year's APPA annual conference. APPA 2013 will be held in Minneapolis, Minnesota, August 2nd through the 4th, so we all hope you can join. If you haven't noticed this week, we've had a very enthusiastic group here from MAPPA. And they're looking forward to having you all in their neighborhood next year. Minneapolis will be a special place for us next year because we will use APPA 2013 to officially kick off APPA's 100th anniversary celebration. Those of you who are familiar with the history of APPA will know that APPA got its start in the Midwest, and so it's only fitting that we return to APPA's Midwestern roots. There are also so much to see and do in Minneapolis, and I can tell you after living there through a couple of winters that you don't want to go then. We'll go in August. APPA 2013 will take place at the Hyatt Regency Minneapolis, located on Nicollet Mall in the heart of downtown. The Hyatt Regency sits inside Minneapolis's restaurant and shopping district, which sounds so much fun, and adjacent to its many lovely parks, lakes, museums, performance centers, and sporting events. Here's a short video from Minneapolis Convention and Visitors Bureau. I think you will enjoy it. If that doesn't look fun. I'd like to offer some short closing remarks and thanking all of our speakers this week. The educational sessions were all such high quality that I was just impressed in all the ones that I was in. I know I was only in a fraction of those that were going on all at the same time. So I hope you all got great experience out of this. To the RMA volunteers here in Colorado who supported this week's conference activity. We couldn't have done it without RMA, and it's their volunteers that helped out here in their backyard, and we're glad to have them. To the APPA 2012 Conference Planning Committee. They did a wonderful job programming this conference and helping to host this event. Past President Darrell Gray, what a great party last night, and a wonderful host and colleague he served as all year long during his presidency. Looking forward to his continuation in his new role. The PC-APPA board for co-locating here in Denver, and it was a bit of a challenge, but such a great opportunity for a region that almost wasn't able to have their annual conference this year, but was able to do it here and bring in some additional PC-APPA members. I want to thank specifically Rick Williams and David Woodson, who really carried the lion's share of work in coordinating that PC-APPA portion of the conference. And then it's been said many times already, but it needs to be emphasized even more. The APPA staff, they do this every day on our behalf and coordinating us, but to bring us in for this annual conference is a monumental task, and they handle it with grace and eloquence, and we thank them for that. So thank you. So with that, let's continue to engage and share and to transform our campuses into even greater learning environments. I'll see you all next year in Minneapolis. Thank you for coming, and safe travels home.